That's what I'm talking about. It is time for people to focus. Be a little magical. Maybe do some hocus pocus as I cut off the music right there in a very abrupt time. It is good to see you all. Welcome to First Kick Seahawks, the show where we prepare you for the first kick of every play by game day. Guess what? Chicken butt. It is game day today. Or is it? The Seahawks are playing a 7 p.m. game, which means that for the Cleveland Browns, they start a football game at 10 p.m. That's absurd. Even by baseball standards, that's absurd. I don't appreciate that for our team, but man, I would be pissed if I was a Cleveland Browns fan because people are going to sleep at 10 p.m. plus the clock, like the internal clock for the players and the coaching staff. Like, that's a hell of a challenge for the Cleveland Browns, especially for guys that are just trying to make a roster, right? They're not going to be necessarily playing their best, and if they are replacing the IVs that are normally filled with water instead with Monster Energy drinks. This episode not brought to you by Monster Energy drinks, but I definitely didn't sleep last night. I've been missing you all this week. As some of you know, I have health issues, and sometimes it makes it difficult to record, but not today. Today is all about football, and it's the last chance for a lot of people to say, I told you so. You got the Broncos fans saying, I told you so about Bo Nix. You have a lot of the Sam Howell truthers saying that they told you so about Sam Howell. Let's see if his trend in the preseason continues as it has in the last 2 weeks. Sam Howell's been playing pretty good. I'm going to tell you I told you so, though. I told you just the last episode that Darrell Taylor was on the hot seat and that there was a good chance he could get traded, or at the very least after this, if there were no trades, cut. And what do you know? Seahawks trade him away to the raw team, right? For a 6th-round pick. I can't believe I don't remember what that is off the top of my head. Doesn't matter because he is fucking gone. And so much for that 2nd-round pick. It just goes to show that draft status isn't everything. And I want to talk a little bit about that because the Seahawks also traded Michael Jackson, but not that one. The Michael Jackson that played cornerback for us. He was a free agent, undrafted, I believe, for us, and he had stuck around the last few years. Good coverage, okay tackling. I said that they had paid him just over $1 million this year, and either he or Artie Burns were going to get kicked out and replaced either with one of these young players that this new regime has brought in or would be traded. And it wasn't Artie Burns. It was Michael Jackson. And Artie Burns has already proven that he can be a high-quality player with his time with the Bears. So it makes sense that Michael Jackson would go. And I told you so. If you have any I told you so's, let me know in the chat or in the comments section below after I record this. But that being said, as I said, draft status doesn't always matter. And we got Michael Barrett, whatever, some gun, and he is out there just exciting the Seahawk fan base, as he should. I looked at some tape of him. He played with Mike McDonald in Michigan, and the big thing about Barrett is he's just a football player. You ever see a guy who you're like, oh, that's a quarterback, that's a running back, that guy should play offensive line, he should play corner. Like this guy, you can't tell because he's just built like a football player. He just plays really good football. He has spent some time as a quarterback. I believe he did that in high school, and then he was a linebacker for Michigan with Mike McDonald. There's a loud sound outside. I'm sorry if you heard that. But Michael Barrett in particular, is it Barrett or Barrett? I've been saying Barrett because I'm stupid. Let's do Barrett. He was a special teams standout at Michigan, and he was drafted in the 7th round by the Panthers this year. So he only had one season where he wasn't with Mike Macdonald. And the big thing about his experience with Mike Macdonald in Michigan, other than the fact that he played with Jim Harbaugh, is he was the communicator. Right, he was the guy who was making a bunch of defensive calls. He was communicating with the safeties and then with the defensive line to make sure that they were all on the same page. He's a communicator. He knows football really well. And then when you get onto special teams, he is constantly popping fools. But he was drafted in the 7th round. Surely he's not a good player. Surely he's not a good prospect, or at the very least, they're just pulling a ticket on a guy. Well, football is often about timing, and you got to be smart to be timing. It doesn't matter how fast you can get from point A to point B if you get there too fast. You need to know what you're looking at. This is something we talked about with Tyrese Knight, where he's got this amazing 10 split, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to put himself in a position to succeed. He's done well so far in the preseason. But on special teams in particular, we just saw last night the 49ers allowed or gave up. It was crazy. So there was a punt that was returned for a touchdown. And then the 49ers came out. I believe it was the 49ers for a kickoff return. And they've been struggling with kickoffs all preseason. But they then returned the ball for 93 yards, which is the longest I've seen in the preseason. But there's been a lot of these preseason games where the only guy that stops the play from being taken to the house is the kicker. And the reason that this ball turned into a 93-yard run was because the kicker was duked out of his shorts. You need a guy, because typically as you got two guys tackling right now, you have the safety basically, and then you have the kicker playing emergency safety. Everyone else is for the most part all blocked up. You need that guy to make sure that Jason Myers never has to tackle. And we've already seen him do at least one tackle this season. And it's painful to watch because Jason Myers isn't that type of football player. But Barrett is. Barrett could rifle his way right on in there. And I'm excited to see that. We got a smart guy who can communicate as a linebacker on defense if we need him to. But most importantly, we have a guy who can communicate on kickoffs. With this new kickoff rule and the new basically game that is played during kickoffs, excuse me while my hair is still wet, I showered earlier, he should have the communication skills and the athleticism with his reach to make those plays on kickoff returns when he's defending. As far as returning the ball, he can do that. Ideally, you wouldn't want him to. Who we would want is instead D. Williams, who he plays wide receiver. I've seen him do some stuff at corner, but mostly it's wide receiver. D. Williams is just a special teams guy. And I think that's mostly what tonight's game is going to be about, is special teams. We have our first 2 to 3 depth chart spots filled out on every single position. The big questions are, who's really going to make this team? Does keeping Artie Burns even matter at this point when we have Woolen, Witherspoon, and Trey Brown already ahead of him? You know, if we got the rest of this roster, which is filled out with a Nehemiah Pritchett, who is shown to be, I think, better than Artie Burns, you have yourself DJ James and Carlton Johnson, who are competing with Willie Roberts and I guess Lance Boykin. I haven't seen Lance Boykin all preseason. They're all competing for that fifth cornerback spot with Artie Burns. If they determine that they would much rather have a Carlton Johnson and James or whatever ensemble of those four guys instead of Artie Burns, we could lose Artie Burns and then save ourselves about $1 million. I don't know what his exact contract is, but a lot of that's going to come to, we have 3 starters at corner. It's very unlikely that we're going to use 4 because we're going to bring down our safeties. We have a Cody Bryant right there who can play corner. If we decide to keep Marquise Blair, he also can play corner. So because Artie Burns isn't a special teams guy, if it turns out that Willie Roberts is really good at special teams and plugging up holes, you keep a Willie Roberts. If Carlton Johnson or DJ James, the same rules apply. That's what today is going to be about tonight, right? It's going to be about who can take our special teams and get that also to the top 10. We highly likely will have a top 10 or a top 5 offense, assuming Geno Smith is as advertised. And then we have a good chance of having a top 10 defense as well. But if our special teams sucks ass, it's gonna hurt us. And with this new kickoff rule, we're going to lose some games because of it. So let's get that shored up now. We can coach some guys up. We can replace an Artie Burns with a good cornerback or a good safety. If they are already on the team every single week playing special team snaps, it's likely that an Artie Burns would not be active on game day because we don't need him. We don't need him for special teams. We have enough depth all the way around him. He's a injury guarantee type of player. We don't need that on the roster, I don't think. We'll find out later this week. I have talked about how John Snyder, historically, he tends to scout out other rosters during the 53-man cutoff. Clearly, he made a trade to get a player he wanted, but it won't stop there. I still highly, highly, highly believe that John Snyder is going to go find a corner or a safety that is released from a team and bring them onto the 53-man roster. On that note, I think that could also happen at running back. We have Kenny McIntosh, who's going up against George Halani. McIntosh has shown that he's averaging like 5 to 6 yards a carry. It's absurd. George Halani is doing okay. George being a better pass blocker than Kenny McIntosh. But Kenny could be in the hot seat if there is a hell of a running back out there that John Snyder really wants, right? This guy can do it all, including pass blocking. Let's bring him in instead. We can sneak a Kenny to the practice squad if we really want to. That's a guy who I believe is in the hot seat. When it comes to the wide receiver position, that's obviously already scored up. We have Lockett, DK, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I say that Jake Bobo and Laviska Shenault are both locks. If we are keeping 6 wide receivers on the roster, Derek Young, his job is to lose. He could lose to D. Williams, who's playing special teams, right? Who I think would likely make the team anyways as a different position. And then Aesop Winston Jr. is basically going head-to-head with Derek Young right now for that position. There has been talk in Seahawk Twitter about whether or not Derek is actually good. Some say that he can't block. Some say he's a good blocker. I think he's all right on special teams. I do know one thing, Aesop Winston Jr. is not a good blocker in comparison, but he's a better receiver. So if you are caring about special teams and you need somebody to block on special teams, I think it is more likely that Derek Young would make that roster so that he can shore up, block shed, do whatever else he needs so that we can make some points or get good field position on special teams. Aesop Winston Jr. would not be able to do that. So I think it is Derek Young's job to lose, with D. Williams being the 7th wide receiver, technically not wide receiver, just a special teams guy that's going to be there. What does this mean for D. Eskridge? Gone, right? He's gone. There's no trade value for him. Nobody wants him. Maybe we sneak him to the practice squad. I think he would want a change of scenery. I think he's just going to be gone. Cody White would probably be the one who ends up making the practice squad over D. Eskridge. The last battle that we're looking at is at the tackle positions. We have seen a lot of Stone Forsythe at left tackle and Michael Darrell at right tackle. Abraham Lucas, I think, will start the season out and on the PUP list. As I said, like last April, it is very likely that you're only going to get 5 to 8 games out of Abraham Lucas on any given season. Those are 5 to 8 really good games, but you need to have 8 starters for a reason, and he would be a starter followed up by George Fant. We already have 2 right tackles. George Fant can also play left tackle. So the big question is Stone Forsythe good enough to continue at left tackle so that if Charles Cross goes down, that we can keep George Fant at right tackle? Or if Stone Forsythe is so poor pass blocking at left tackle that we would have to then move George Fant over during the season, would Michael Darrell then win the job because he plays right tackle better than Stone Forsythe? I don't think that's the case, but Michael Darrell does have a good shot to make that roster spot because we have him under contract control longer than Stone Forsythe. Stone is on his last year, would probably end up getting picked up by another team, but it is also likely that John Snyder could just find a guy. Both of these guys look like they can be replaceable. Michael Darrell has a chance to improve, right? But he also can be quickly replaced with somebody else. This isn't to say that I want it necessarily to happen because I like consistency in the offensive line room. But if we're talking about literally the last spot, then that is definitely a hot seat. There's one offensive line position. As far as starting snaps, Laken Tomlinson, of course, is our left guard. And we have Anthony Bradford, who I'm pretty sure has secured that right guard position. He and Christian Haynes have been switching off because Tomlinson hasn't been playing practice squad. We've seen Christian Haynes play a lot of left guard and looking pretty solid. He needs some work on power plays and overloads, right? I think he just physically needs to get into NFL level offensive line shape, which means he'll probably be better next year. So Anthony Bradford is already in that position, and he is looking really solid in more than one way. But the question will be, who will be Laken Tomlinson's backup? So far, it appears that Christian Haynes is going to back up the right guard and the left guard position. But if Christian Haynes is so damn good that you just can't get him, keep him off the field, you could see him maybe swing out to right tackle to compete for a starting position over there. He played a ton of right guard in college, but right tackle is right there. He is familiar with the position. I would not be surprised if we saw him take some snaps at right tackle so that they can decide who that backup to George Fant truly is going to be. Can we let a Stone Forsythe or stay at left tackle as the backup and then let Michael Darrell go and try to put him on the practice squad if we can? Defensive tackle, people keep asking about Cameron Young. Cameron Young is one of those guys where every single draft there's a player that gets injured or gets tweaked in camp and that just really never plays and kind of falls off the map. Cameron Young, I think, is that guy. It's possible he could pull a Naz Jones and then have one good season, but he's never going to be a starter. Naz Jones also proved to be replaceable. Part of it is if you spend your entire time in physical therapy, you're not getting your body and your mind right for football. Darrell Hall clearly kicking some ass at the weak side linebacker position. The big question will be Sonny Anderson or Jamie Sheriff trying to compete for the backup position. They would be inactive on game day. The other position that is to lose, safety, Rayshawn Jenkins is healthy again, but you have Kayvon Wallace, Cody Bryant, and Marquise Blair. People like Ty Okada. I haven't seen anything from Ty Okada yet. And then Jariq Reed. I don't think Jariq Reed would make the roster. I think that the way that it has been setting out, Kayvon Wallace has looked solid. Cody Bryant looks typical, not quite athletic enough, but always where he needs to be. Kind of like the Michael Barrett of the defensive back room. And then Marquise Blair looks crazy athletic, as usual. If he can stay healthy, you'd always want him on the roster. The problem is his pursuit angles. He often gets ahead of himself and just charges down the field when he does not need to do that. So I would assume Marquise Blair would make the roster, considering Reed has some injury issues right now. So thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to see what happens after this preseason game, not just only how they perform on the field itself. What I have found is the roster is always going to be in flux. And this next week, because there's no preseason week 4 game, they get the week off before the Broncos game that we get in a couple weeks with Bo Nix starting. I find that we could have at least 5 new players on the 53-man roster, maybe 4, right, that were not a part of training camp at all. And this is including Barrett, right, as one of those guys. So I appreciate you all being here. Go Hawks. As Donald Hester said, I like to have some good music at the beginning. That was Hocus Pocus by Focus, if you're curious. And it's because we got to focus up for this game, right? Our preseason players got to be focused and maybe work a little bit of magic so they can make a team and keep their NFL dreams alive. Go Hawks. I'll see you next time.